Okay, so this is the questions 6 through 10 on the multiple choice for the quarterfinal. Again, the last stretch. We got this. Let's read number 6. Given the following figure, find the horizontal distance traveled. Now, to give you context, what the heck is horizontal? Now, there are two things, vertical and horizontal. Vertical goes up and down. When you say I have vertical jump, that's going up and down. This time, however, it's asking us horizontal. That means it's going from left to right. And so what we're trying to do is, well, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to solve for x or for y? Since we're going from left to right, we are solving for x. But how do we do that? All we need to simply do is label the three sides. 300. Well, 300 is going to be the longest side, so we label that as h. We see the angle. We see that x is next to the angle. We call that a. We call that the adjacent side. And then lastly, y is o. It's away from the angle. It's the opposite. And so if I'm really trying to solve for x, I have to ask myself, which two sides do I use? I have a, I have h. Since I have a and h, what am I going to use? Remember, the phrase that I'm looking for is SOHCAHTOA. I have a and I have h. Because I have these two, I'm going to use cosine. So I'm going to write the cosine of 23 equals a over h. So a is x, h is 300. Well, how am I going to solve for x now? One thing we can do is make cosine under 1 and then cross multiply. What does that give us? Well, that gives us 1x equals 300 times cosine 23. And so what does this give us? Well, putting it in the planner, making sure our calculators are in degrees, we get 300 cosine of 23. This gives us our final answer, 276.15 feet. And that's the answer for x, using trigonometry and cross multiplying. All right, let's move on to the probability section on our test. Number 7. You have 8 items in your backpack, 3 pens, 1 pen, 1 eraser, and the rest are highlighters. Find the probability of getting pencils and then highlighters to add on with replacement. So clearly there's some things I'm highlighting to indicate what I'm looking for. Pencils, highlighters with replacement, and the word and. So from this sentence alone, just this sentence alone, I'm going to make P for probability because that's what it's asking us. I'm going to go from left to right and see how I can make that into a statement. Probability starts with P. Pencils, I can also write that as P for pencils. And, because I'm going to use the word and, highlighters, I'm going to write H. And that's it. When I see and, one thing you need to see is and probability uses multiplication. So we're going to say P of P times P of H. Well, okay, what good does that do us? When I have this, I'm going to figure out the probabilities of both. So what am I going to do? All I simply need to do is find the probability. The probability of getting a pencil. A pencil, there are 3 pencils out of how many? There's 8 of them in total, 8 items in my backpack. Now the next part, because it says with replacement, I'm just going to keep it as an 8. And this time I'm going to ask how many highlighters there are. In this case, I need to figure out how much is the rest. 3 are pencils. 1 is a pen. 1 is an eraser. That makes a total of 5 items. So what I can do is I can do 8 minus 5, giving us 3 highlighters. So I can do 3 times 8. 3 are highlighters out of the 8 in total. What can I do with this now? Multiply the top. 3 times 3 is 9. And then lastly, 8 times 8, giving you 64. That's the answer to number 7, or a similar one at least. We move on to number 8. In number 8, it says this: I roll a 8-sided die. I'm going to underline that. And the question is, what is the probability? Again, you read probability, you underline that. And this time you have to ask yourself, well, what is it asking for? You look and it says the dice shows odd or, and that's the key part, the word or, a number less than 3. Now, keep in mind this. I have to ask myself, because it's or, we did two different scenarios. Whether or not the thing that we're doing for probability is either one thing or two things. Let's see what we're doing. If I'm reading the first sentence again, it says, I roll an 8-sided die. That's clearly one thing. I'm only rolling one 8-sided die. Because it's one thing, I'm going to make a Venn diagram. This Venn diagram is going to show us the possibilities that I can do either or. So let's look at the first one on the left. If I'm underlining and I see what I underlined, this is going to be odd on the left. The second one is a number less than 3. So I'm going to say number less than 3. So I'm going to write each of those possibilities. What's an odd number? An odd number starts at 1 and I count by 2. So 1, 3, 5, and 7. The reason why I stop at 7 is because it goes from the numbers 1 through 8. What about the numbers less than 3? Well, that's clearly 1 and 2. The Venn diagram, the thing that's so crucial with it is that it tells us what's in common with both. What's in common with both is the number 1, and that's it. Well, what good does that do us? Now I can set up my probability. I look at the odd, and I see that's 4 out of 8. I can add it with the other side of the circle. That's 2 out of 8. 8 comes from the 8-sided die. And lastly, I'm going to subtract the middle. How many numbers do I see in the middle? 1. So I'm going to put 1 out of 8. This is not saying that I see the number 1, because if I put the number 3, I'm not going to change it to 3 out of 8. It would still be 1 over 8. So that's the important thing. This is counting how many numbers there are. Well, when you do this, the 8 stays as an 8 on the bottom, and all you got to do is add and subtract. 4 plus 2 is 6, minus 1 gives us 5. So our answer is 5 out of 8, involving the Venn diagram. Okay, moving on to number 9. This time, it's a little bit different. I spin this spinner and flip a coin. What is the probability that I spin? Okay, so first off, probability is keyword. I spin a C. Okay, that's the first thing. Or, okay, this time I see or. Will I do Venn diagram? Land tails on a coin. This is where it gets a little bit complicated because this time we can't use a Venn diagram. A Venn diagram only uses one thing at a time. In this case, we have two things that are happening. I'm spinning something and I'm flipping a coin. Because there involves two things, we have to think of something else. We have to think of using the formula. And what formula am I referring to? I'm referring to this formula for A or B. The key thing is that I add A and B, and I subtract A and B together. We kind of did that in the Venn diagram, but the main thing that looks a little bit different is going to be when they are together, when I flip the coin and I spin the spinner. But let's see how that works. I'm going to read from left to right again, creating my formula. So P stands for probability. It says that I spin a C, so I'm going to write the letter C. I'm going to write the word or because that's what it says in the sentence. Land tails, so I'm going to put T. So C or T is what I'm going to write. I'm going to use the same formula. So probability of C plus the probability of T minus the probability of C and T. So notice I wrote that into the formula. Now all I need to do is just figure out how to figure out the probabilities. Landing C on a spinner. Well, I only see one section that has a C, so I'm going to put 1 out of 4. For landing tails on a coin, that would be 1/2. And the most crucial part of this is that because it's two things, there are two separate things, flipping a coin and spinning a spinner. One thing I need to do is I need to subtract the two probabilities when they multiply. So because it says the word and, just like how we did in the last one, when it said and, we're going to multiply. So when I have this, this gives me my final answer of, I believe, 5 out of 8. Okay, This leads us to our last question, which is question number 10. There are 6 people. 2 have March birthdays, 4 have April birthdays. If I choose 3 people, find the probability. Oh, okay, so it says probability. I already know that I need to do something with that. At least one has a birthday in March. So, okay, I highlighted 3 things. And so I'm going to make that into the formula. P for probability. And this time it says at least. So I'm going to write the word at least. 1. So I'm going to write the number 1. And I'm going to write M for March. The thing that we learned today and the thing that we reviewed is the opposite of at least can be written as 1 minus. So this 1 minus tells me that I should think the opposite. And so what is the opposite of at least? The opposite of at least means I have no birthdays in March. So if 1 minus means the opposite, then clearly this is the opposite. The opposite of, I'm going to say do the opposite for this one, and then I'm going to write no M is the opposite of at least. Okay, so if I have this formula, what's the point? Well, now what I can do is I can say 1 minus the probability of no Marches. Well, instead of getting March, what would I get? I would get April. So I'm going to write 4 because that's how many people have birthdays in April out of how many in total? There's 6 people. So I'm going to write 4 out of 6. So again, 6 people came because that's the total. 4 came because that's April and not March. That's why we wrote no March. And then lastly, I'm going to put to the power of 3. Why do I put it to the power of 3? It's because I choose 3 people. So this is me choosing 3 people. So when I put this into my equation, this gives me the following answer. I believe it should give you 19 over 27. And so that is the answer to number 10. So across all of these questions, I know that it can get really confusing, but please make sure and just pause whenever you go into a problem, how it's similar to the ones I just offered and how we're just trying to make each conceptual thing. I know that it can get difficult to memorize or just understand each of these problems, but hopefully with enough practice, maybe trying this before you look at the solutions can really be beneficial. But with that being said, good luck in studying this multiple choice. The next video will cover the free response.